I'm Theron Ramacharaka, and I have the feeling this is going to be a lengthy video. So I ask that you stop looking at it right now unless you have time to persevere through the end of it. It is an important video in this part 3 of personal evolution and achievement training here on my channel. So please, stop watching and come back to it when you do have time for its entirety. Or, I guess you can look at part of it and then come back and look at the rest of it. But I want you, one way or the other, get all the way through to the end. Because if you have somewhat committed yourself to personal involvement or maximizing your performance in life, this is going to be important for you. The material that I post here in Personal Evolution Part 3 all has to do with theory and practical instruction in personal involvement and achievement. Whether we consider achievement with respect to personal involvement or personal involvement with respect to achievement in some set of major life endeavors. Ultimately, the greatest endeavor is movement toward true selfhood or self-actualization. Lesser scale endeavors might be along the lines of winning an Olympic gold medal or bringing yourself to a point in life in which you achieve more in all areas of life with lower stress, or say something career-oriented like healthily carrying out the duties of an emergency medical technician. And by healthily, I mean witnessing and attending to people's acute medical problems, injuries, and deaths, such that you minimize or endure no emotional hardship and relevant stress, no repression, no suppression, no clinical distancing, and yet with minimized or no short and long-term ill effects. Well, regardless, for maximum effectiveness and efficiency of motion in any such direction, and for maximum performance, not just in cause, but also in long-term effect, affairs from the start must start off with some quite fundamental levels of understanding and action, building upon them from that starting point. For one, clarification and purification of relevant motives and goals is vital. 2, some awareness of exactly what you're doing and the laws and principles regarding how it works aid in the actual working of it. In fact, that awareness can constitute half the picture when such knowledge intentionally is applied as part of the practice itself. And 3, starting off with a basic understanding of the cause and the structure of the cosmos and your relationship with it consciously grounds all of your work in its true grounding. Now, yeah, of course, not all aspects of these 3 things can be arrived at in a moment. It has to come in stages. But these 3 areas must be touched on from the start, with a special emphasis on taking action with clarifying and refining your goals and motives as a logical first step in your practical application. So let's set out from the start that what we call individual will is really our use of will. Will is will wherever it shows up. Now, before going any further with that, here I want to introduce a roughly stated, but very pragmatic at this point, distinction among individual and universal with respect to 4 concepts. And those are will, mind, being, and self. We'll just keep this simple. Just to get into a certain mindset that is grounded in the truth of affairs and that will increasingly serve us instrumentally as we progress along the lines of personal evolution in life. Roughly stated, mind is the plane of mental activity. And what we call individual mind is really a focal point of universal mind. Individual mind is completely dependent on universal mind. Mind is the same basic stuff no matter at what level it shows up. Will is the power to act or to control energy. And again, what we call individual will is really a focal point of universal will, such that individual will really boils down to our access to and employment of universal will, upon which what we call individual will is completely dependent. And likewise, what we call individual being really is a focal point of universal being, or of just beingness itself, upon which we call individual being is entirely dependent. And the same with self, which we might roughly define as our sense of individuality and identity. What we call individual self is really a focal point of universal or cosmic self, in which our individual self entirely depends. In fact, this focal point of universal selfhood is our true self and our true individuality. Our idea of selfhood often gets so mixed up in the delusion that it is separate from the universal by way of identifying with the lower planes of our experience, and that by way of crystallizing a false ego built around physical sensory experience with all of its accoutrements such as relevant emotions, desires, thoughts, personality, tastes, preferences, actions, and so on. We may furthermore say that the essence of will is spirit, while its outer active portion is called volition. And the essence of what we call our individual will is what we call individual spirit, or our I, capital letter I. And just like mind is the same basic stuff no matter at what level it shows up, the same is true of being, will, and I. One more note about universal will. In accordance with what we might call universal creative life principle, universal will always pushes affairs in a general movement toward evolvement, a betterment, a becoming more, in a sense, toward all individual focal points' full consciousness of their sameness as cosmic consciousness and I-ness. And importantly, all of these, mind, will, being, consciousness, and so on, are causally dependent on the one causeless, immutable absolute that just is, or isness itself. Isness itself, absolute that just is, beyond and regardless of all being, time, space, relativity, motion, substance, and consciousness. So, the more we become conscious of and have direct experience of these aforementioned fundamental truths, the more effectively and efficiently our personal evolution progresses. So now let's frame our endeavor, whatever it is here, whatever yours is, with respect to all of this material. Let's frame it in a larger context. All right effort, all right work occurs as service to humanity's evolution and moreover to that of all life. And it occurs as such because it is our duty as instruments of universal will. Furthermore, to function at our best in doing right work, we must learn to use our individual will to intentionally control our thoughts, emotions, and actions toward the achievement of clearly defined ethical goals as part of our duty as instruments of universal will. Ethical motives and goals ultimately function to serve humanity's evolution. Now, that is, of course, if we're keeping our discourse within the parameters of humanity here, which is a plenty large enough parameter for now and for some time to come. So let's say, for example, our goal is to healthily carry out the duties of emergency medical technician work. So let's rephrase it as a question in this larger context. How do you use your individual will to intentionally control your thoughts, emotions, and actions toward the achievement of your clearly defined goal involving witnessing and attending to people's acute medical problems, injuries, and deaths such that you minimize or endure no emotional, psychological, or relevant stress difficulties, all as part of your duty as an instrument of universal will. Well, in the end, the solution to this question, or to anyone like it, depending on your goal, must satisfy at least 13 necessary conditions. What are they? Well, 1, the solution must appeal to your trust in its value. 2, it must be logical. It has to make sense. Number 3, intuitive. It has to ring true to you. Number 4, it has to be practical. I mean, you have to be able to do it. It must be doable. 5, it must be consistent with universal laws of operation. And 6, it must be consistent with mental laws of operation. And 7, it must be consistent with natural laws of operation. What about number 8? It must involve increased understanding. It has to increase your awareness. 9, it must involve required action. 10, it needs to evolve the way you do things mentally. 11, it must evolve the way you do things emotionally. 12, it must evolve the way you do things physically. 13, it must evolve your control of energy. Well, there are at least those 13 necessary conditions. What about the sufficient condition? The sufficient condition for actualizing your goal is your earnest action with the necessary conditions. But we immediately delve deeply into cognitive information now concerning the laws, forces, and principles that work behind the scenes, so to speak, to some extent here. Given your application and your goal with it, plus your imminent time frame for significant progress, this kind of information is required. You must have all angles of approach at your disposal from the start. I mean, your goal is radical, in a sense, and so is the corresponding method ideology here. You don't have time to waste. I don't want you to find yourself sinking with respect to your goal before you have everything I can offer at your disposal and underway in application. So we have to come at this from various angles right from the start, and that includes some cognitive information. As I was insinuating just a little bit ago, that's one of the things that we have to get, set some fundamental groundwork with right at the start. I want you to be ahead of the game, right out of the gate. Now note, that theory here for us is only important where it's of real practical value, and I understand that. I have selected only theory that I believe is instrumental to your goal. And often even in that theory lays further high-level practical application when analyzed. Naturally, though, some such theory needs to be explicated by placing it in a larger context, which makes some talk appear to be non-instrumental, but that's only an appearance. Our approach involves study, it involves time, it involves intensity, and it involves a high level of interest. It's a rigorous and it's a radical program. Diligent effort with it is a mandate, but the relevant payoff is high. It's a definite movement toward your goal, if not complete actualization of it. Now, such goals require a leap in your personal evolution. It seems clear to me that you're ripe for this evolvement, for conditions evolving it pervade your life. You easily have the tools for it at hand here, and you walked right into the whole affair. Because here you are and here am I. So at this point, you stand in a position to either regress or to progress, claiming your own. There really is no middle ground. No standing still. Perhaps the inner urge to progress comes to you as a feeling of necessity. Your subconscious mind is busy on this, and from my point of view, it's making it blatant that right now is the right time. So, in a sense, you must follow through, following the gentle but blatant urge of individual evolution, for victory over your lower self, and for the avoidance of deep existential pain if you don't. And out of duty to your higher self. Most of all, out of duty to the law and the universal will working through you. And it might just be the case that you must follow through now, at this right time. For this is when a path is spreading out before you. Things are lining up in your favor with respect to it. This is when there exists the least obstacles with respect to your accomplishing it. This is when any apparent obstacles, such as time to do it, are trivial. This is when the door is open and the entire universe is directly backing you. Excuse me. If you don't follow through now, I'm not trying to sound argumentative here. I'm talking from experience with myself and other people. If you don't follow through now, pain due to that will increasingly follow, and all that is lined up in your favor might incrementally disperse due to the postponement while opportunity presents itself. This is the sort of evolutionary step that, if not taken when it is made known to you, can easily result in slipping the other direction due to missing the proverbial boat. The inner angst over that becomes searingly hellish given enough time, and complications can turn maze-like. And from that point, retracing steps in the positive direction constitutes utter drudgery. And finding the way out of the mess can appear completely hopeless. I know these things are true. I have plummeted into that hell in the past, in all the lower planes at the same time. So diligent effort, yes. But right now is when it's easiest. Give it your central attention. And whatever else needs to get done in your current activities will still get done. Because it too will all fall into place. Simply because the time is right. The universe knows what it's doing. Therefore, concern over time to fit in the project here is not a legitimate concern. The only obstacles right now would amount to those that you mentally contrive or materially put in the way. Ignore all apparent obstacles and go about the matter at hand with diligent effort. Now, this will not break you in any way. None of this. It's safe. Its methods involve no pressure. Its methods involve no strain. It's only a rigorous approach to a demanding milieu. Both the approach and the milieu necessitate attention and concentrated effort. You're up to doing the work because you're where it is. You're right here, center stage. You're up to it. The only pressure involved is the inherent nudge of punctuated evolvement at its natural time and in its appropriate life context for you. The time is now, and the context is the synchronicity of the conditions constituting your current state of affairs within and beyond your conscious awareness. Now, here on my channel, what you see is a work in continual progress on my part with this. If you feel attracted to it, which apparently you do, then trust that for you its in progress development exactly corresponds with what you need and deserve. Still, I do appreciate your understanding and tolerance as my part of the project unfolds. So, what about you needs to be revised in order for things to run consistently with your goal? with this. Control over thoughts certainly jumps out. Emotional management too. No matter what your starting points are with these. Better presence of mind as well. Something needs to be done about mental images and with the sounds that go with them. Something needs to happen about how you go about feeling. Should you feel more? Should you feel less? Should you just feel more accurately? Or is there something else about it that can evolve in the right direction? What about death? What about the idea of someone living while death might be better? Maybe something should be done about your worldview. Also about your view of who you are and who other people are, and about events and the things that people do and the things that happen to them. Perhaps even about what people are. In fact, maybe just about every part of your way of being needs some revision. No matter what your starting point is, there's always much room for systematic development. Well, that then involves appropriate changes at all planes and in your sense of identity in them. And that's where we stand in this project. If you were to meet your goal. Now, none of this is to say there's something wrong with your current state of affairs. It just means that your current state of affairs is probably not consistent with your goal at this point. To be consistent with your goal requires more than average personal development. If average commonplace methods and objects of personal development were appropriate, more people would have accomplished it. I want to talk more about that idea of sense of identity. I have used the term. We've talked about it here a little bit and other places here on my channel. Other people refer to it sometimes, but what's it mean? We take it to mean who or what we think we are. Fine. But that vague phrase usually is not associated with significant personal development. However, a related, more important phrase does, and that is the plane of our being in which our conscious sense of identity manifests. As we have discussed, it so happens that most people's sense of identity is in the material plane, whether they know it or not. If our inner well-being is adversely affected by what comes through our physical senses, that's a clue. All sorts of thoughts, emotions, and so forth get wrapped up in sensory input. Even some of our highest thoughts and beliefs. Our sense of identity lies somewhere in that maze. For example, let's say we encounter an act of evil, and our perception of it plays into our experience of ill effects in its aftermath. It might play into anger, at least. Now, did evil come in through our senses? In a scenario, well, the result of it did. But the idea of evil was already in the mind. It was the idea combined with sensory information that adversely affected your relevant well-being. And that idea, although it being something mental, has to do with the material plane and the things that people do in it and the things that happen to them and that come in through the physical senses. Evil is an example of an entirely lower several planes thing. Over that there should be no doubt. Self-identity among those planes keeps us wrapped up in ways of being that are wrapped up in those planes. The overall task in our project is multiple. For one, it is to evolve such affairs as emotional responses and emotional management at their own level. which involves the physical, but mostly the astral plane levels of our general beings. Stated more simply, it involves dealing with emotions at the emotional level, working at them head on. But another aspect of the task involves moving sense of identity to an entirely higher level, so that you can also learn to manage these lower plane events within your general well-being from a higher point than that in which they exist. Let's call that the greater key. And the former, dealing with emotional events, dealing with emotional management at the level of emotion itself, the lesser key. Both keys must be employed, the greater and the lesser. But what about that phrase mentioned a few moments ago? Can we right now get a better grip on what the plane of your being in which your conscious sense of identity manifests means? The phrase is foreign to most people and amorphous to many people who have considered it. We can understand the idea of planes of being and understand how it applies to us to some extent. And we can think we have a grip on knowledge of higher planes, and we can say, I am spirit. But it seems that we still feel a bit baffled by the phrase. Consider an analogy regarding some animals' evolution from what is called group soul to individualized soul, just for the sake of elucidation of our point here. Let's just look at an analogy. And you don't have to agree with the ideology involved in the analogy. Just follow along with it to set up an analogy. Some domestic species are ones that can evolve from group soul to individualized soul in specific cases. Here and there exists a specific example of such a pet. In such cases, no doubt the pet has had such a life that it seems to think like a person. People might point out that the animal even thinks it is a person. It anticipates what its master wants. It displays great compassion and a desire to cooperate. It seems like a person in an animal's body. It seems to not only act in certain human ways, but also actually identify its very sense of self with humanity. Identify its very sense of self with humanity. It seems consciously that far above cathood or doghood, and that consciousness seems to pervade the animal's inner workings and outer workings. Such an animal is probably about to individualize and enter humanity in its first bona fide incarnation. When it does, it starts at the bottom of the human species and animal-like, but just previously, it was at the very top of animalhood. Now, that's an example of identifying with a higher kingdom to the point where the corresponding evolution then manifests. Similarly, that was an analogy, okay? Similarly, when having done what it takes to take on enough attributes of a higher plane and believe our very selves to belong to that plane, and go on thinking and feeling and acting like the attributes of that plane, we eventually transmute conscious awareness to that plane to whatever extent and quality our new succession of cause and effect takes us at any given point. We then literally find our sense of identity rooted in that plane, regardless of what our intellect tells us due to its acquired knowledge of planes. What is more, if our sense of identity is rooted in the physical plane, and as such we are internally largely affected by what comes in through our physical senses and thoughts that follow from that information, it follows that if our sense of identity is rooted in a higher plane, the corresponding process will follow. We will be centrally, consciously affected by the information and characteristics of that plane. Excuse me. If that plane or overall frequency bandwidth, vibration rate, happens to be even the lowest subplane of the higher mental one or the causal plane, our physical senses are where, by the way, let me start again. If that plane happens to be even the lowest subplane of the higher mental one or the causal one, where evil and human imperfection really have no place, well then, although we still have our physical senses and they work just fine and we still have existence through all the planes, we do not process the information coming into our senses the same way. For one, the little ego does not exist in that higher plane, and therefore it is less, our little ego is less or non-affected by affairs, or in higher cases yet, doesn't even exist at all anymore. Our point of view is entirely different. For example, although we understand the lower level of discourse about something like evil, we ourselves are above it in our knowledge, emotions, and our overall well-being. Imagine not feeling burdened by the evils of the world, and in fact barely noticing them except by choice. Now that was just to get a clearer idea of what it means to identify with some other plane than the lowest, or the lowest of the lower set of planes, the lower subplanes of the lower set of planes. The phrase seems obscure if we are still largely identified with the lowest plane, the physical. For we do not, in that case, we don't yet have present experience of having moved our conscious sense of identity to any higher one. So hopefully the example of the animal helped. Well, back to our hypothetical goal of emergency medical work, healthily performed. That is, the problem of healthily dealing with people in terrible physical, astral, and lower mental plane situations, it finds its major solution in this greater key. But the same key applies to any truly effective endeavor along the lines of achievement and self-evolvement. The lesser key is to deal better with the phenomena of those lower planes at their own plane. These combined aspects of the solution are the keys to it. That way, not only are, for example, emotions learned to be dealt with at their own level with evolved emotional management techniques, which actually draw on higher plane attributes anyway, but also the very act of employing those techniques is approached from a higher plane perspective and sense of identity itself. This not only adds much power to the techniques, but it also helps us to rise above the very phenomena that the techniques are meant to help us manage. Well, this is our approach here. It's the radical approach to a radical situation. It's the appropriate approach to a problem that cannot be solved by lower plane work alone. That is why people rarely solve it for themselves. And no wonder many people refer to the rare ones who can deal with human life in this world with total compassion and very low stress and minimized or no ill personal effects as saints. So, you must be ready to evolve. To actualize your goal, you have to engage the sufficient condition. Hopefully, what I give you to know and to do will be enough of the right stuff. If not, it will point you in the right direction far better than anything else available that I know of. It will in the least make a dramatic improvement. Fortunately, I am giving you methods the results of which have no limits. So in large, by far, it is your earnestness that will determine the extent of the result for you. Now, at times in this course of videos and posts, I will seem to wander off into something that might appear off track. Largely, it'll be because I have thought of something related to the topic at hand and wanted to make it available to you. I do not have much time to revise my entire video set here at every turn or edition. There is a lot of esoteric material that is relevant to what things there are to do. And part of this project does involve esoteric understanding, to be understood to such extent that such understanding becomes no longer esoteric, but part of your everyday thinking and perception. So sometimes I will come up with something and decide I need to stick this in here at this point, and you'll click on here, you'll access this channel or this Personal Evolution Part 3 playlist and realize, he stuck something in and I'm already kind of past that point now. I have to go back. Is it out of sequence now? No. At that point, it will have come to you in the manner that you needed and deserved right then. Like I said, it doesn't matter when you tune in here. I could be up to this for the rest of my life, and it'll still be evolving, hopefully. And that's just the way it is with evolution. All right. Speaking of saints, I'm no saint. I'm a little different than you are. I'm not above you. I don't think I am. I know a little more than you do, probably. Maybe less. I just currently maybe have more knowledge in these affairs, and maybe not that either. Even in these affairs, these specific ones. I do have a little more experience with this specific material because I have worked with it myself, and I'm the one putting it together. That's about it here. Progress with some of the material will be slow. Don't expect it all to come together suddenly for you. But some results of the actions you will perform will be nearly immediate. Other breakthroughs, like I say, will come more slowly. Some will not be noticeable until later after the inner workings have taken place subconsciously, even though they're taking place immediately. Still just subconsciously, and then they'll become noticeable later. That can happen. That will happen. Some understanding will come in increments. And as your sensitivity increases, you will identify and feel more subtle and sublime states of affairs. That'll play a role in it too. But no matter what, it is all meant to work together, and it will. Now, I wish I had time to more carefully increment every bit of it for you from the start. I wish I had the time and the forethought to do that. But it will come together nonetheless if you follow through and throughout. So at times, if I appear to wander with the information or if I insert something into the middle of what I've already posted, I'm going through a conceptual flow as well as building a course of evolvement here in accordance with a plan to do so that increasingly becomes more intentional on my part. And I want you to follow along with that understanding and tolerance, please. It has to be a part of a process for us both. And sometimes insight comes more easily when you follow along with a flow of ideas in this manner, actually. And admittedly, sometimes my flow of ideas are just the ways they got recorded and posted here, even sometimes without revision. Follow along no matter what the case appears to be, please, for it will always lead somewhere definite, with plenty to assimilate along the way. And with that set forth, it's time to get to work. So far, we approached it slightly informally here in this channel. Or at least at this point I'm posting this. I want to get more formal now. And by that I mean in accordance with a formula. So far I have given you suggestions. I don't like to say you should do this or you should do that, but please take suggestions as necessities. Or quite near to them. And the next section here in this video, right now, involves action on your part, and I strongly suggest it. It involves something critical to the project's success, and it involves an experience that I want you to have. The experience will be deeply significant to you, and in the end will involve deeper understanding that I, again, strongly suggest that you have as your own. This action involves your motives and goals. Now, at first mention, this suggested action might seem boring and trite. And this might not be the last actions that I strongly suggest that might at first seem boring and trite. Some such work might even at first seem a bit strange to do, or monotonous, or difficult to persevere. Well, these things are true for various reasons. One being that such work is not the usual everyday sort of thing to do. If it were, more people would be high achievers and self-evolvers. The importance is in how the action gets done and in the experience itself. And in, for now, occult or hidden understanding, occult understanding acquired and mentally employed as it gets done. It'll only be so-called occult at first until it becomes your commonplace way of thinking. And then it's no longer hidden away. And when the action is finished, its importance shift. Let me start over because I interrupted myself there to explain something. The importance is in how the action gets done and in the experience itself. And when the action is finished, its importance shifts to its results and to what you can do with them. Now, this following action with goals and motives is quite real stuff, and I will spell it out thoroughly. And here's another point in which if you don't have time right now to follow through with this whole video, you want to put it on hold for a moment, you want to go do something else and come back to it, or maybe come back to it tomorrow, this would be a good breaking point, or keep going. But get through to the end. You've come this far. Get through to the end. Either stay with me right now or come back to me later. Come back to it later here. All right? This would be a decent breaking point. Now, this following action with goals and motives is quite real stuff, and I'll spell it out thoroughly here. Note that it will involve a whole new way to do some same old thing. That's important. If you learn to do one same old thing in a whole new way, then you have experience that it can assist you in doing any same old thing in a whole new way. And this following is a stupendous thing to do it with. Notice that this involves something to, in fact, do. Something important to fully understand is that what makes this action work isn't the outer side of it. To perform only that side of it would amount to little more than a quick exercise you might do in a very good employee achievement training seminar. You must apply every part of the instruction, miss no part. If you do this, you accomplish plenty because you apply the required occult principles. Sometimes people know about such principles but haven't figured out how to use them. Now remember, like I said, none of this will hurt you. It's safe. It's not going to hurt anybody else either. Nobody. Not you. Nobody. Not now, not later. Simply talking about principles of how things actually work. Things that people don't normally, fundamental principles like universal laws of operation, mental laws of operation. Okay? Sometimes people know about them, but they haven't figured out how to use them. Well, the answer has to involve either something you do with the external world or something you do with your internal world, or both. And it makes sense that if we're dealing with, so to speak, hidden forces, they must be hidden from the surface and not seen by the physical senses, right? Therefore, they must be part of our inner world. This means that we're using our minds, our emotions, and our other energies in specific ways. This is how the majority of the real work gets done. Not the outer side of it. The minority of it gets done by what we do with our physical bodies and the outer world. So when I say something like, focus your utmost attention on the following as you do it, well, that means literally do that. That's not just a side note or a suggestion or a hint for those people who actually want to focus on it, for a little extra boost, or something I put in there just as a matter of course because it's the right thing to put in there and I should say it because I'd be doing, you a disfavor if I didn't just put that phrase in there. No. It means literally do that as an important, vital, crucial part of it. It means to place as much unfailing mental focus on it. If I say focus your utmost attention on the following as you do it, it means to place as much unfailing mental focus on it as you can. If it helps, think of that aspect of what you're doing as an attention training opportunity. In fact, go ahead, make it into one. Do it at your peak level of ability. Just this one thing, utmost unfailing attention, can be quite a challenge. And instruction here is usually more complex than just that, though. So there really is a lot going on. Each component must be carried out to its fullest possible extent, with the greatest possible awareness of all that is going on as it happens, and with fullest possible intent. When you do it this way, the components of how you do it create the effects, with the causes and the effects being roughly equal in magnitude. And when you do it this way, you also strengthen your use of the components, all of them, for the next time. This is how you progress with them. This includes your depth of understanding and immediate awareness of what you are doing, those being vital ingredients in the operation. The instructions will give you all the ingredients. Pay close attention to them and to carrying them out. In this next section, you will engage in a process that is fundamental to many applications. The process involves purification and transmutation. Transmutation has to do with changing something to a higher level or form of itself, or bringing it to bear on a higher plane. You cannot transmute something until it is purified at its current level or plane. An example is in Raja Yoga. The extent to which the real progress occurs is the extent to which purification occurs. Intentionally employing such principles is using occult or hidden principles. Not employing them produces surface results only. That is not to say that they are never employed without the specific intent to do so. They do get applied. They do get applied beyond awareness quite often. Not in a controlled and full-blown manner in that case, though. So why employ them in a controlled and full-blown manner? Because they work. Why? Well, simply due to the fact that they are the principles behind the way things work. And it is the case that for results to be consistent with your goal, they must result in more than average personal development. And like I said, if average commonplace methods and objects of personal development were appropriate, more people would have accomplished it. You need to apply the right principles in the right ways and to their fullest possible extent. Now, I strongly invite you to engage in some personal alchemy as follows. It involves purification, transmutation, hermetic sealing, and controlled application. This is most lengthy and complex. This is perhaps the most lengthy and complex action instruction in this whole project. But you only have to do it once. So make it good. Now I'm entering a section here that I call taking action, refining the goals. But there is a bit more discourse involved with it too. At this point in the general project, it's vital for you to establish crystal clarity over your motives and goals. Can you get exactly where you want to go with all of this if you don't know exactly where you're going? That is, your goals. And what drives you to action in the going? That is, your motives. Those two being closely related to one another? Well, no, you can't. And you won't. There is nothing wrong with your current identification of your goals in life. No. And with this work here. But whether you realize that at present, your statement of them can be radically refined. And that's important. The fact and the reasons for it should become clear to you as you continue through this instruction. Now, it just occurred to me to add this. I have referred to alchemy here, which involves transmutation. I also, in the immediately preceding paragraph, said the word refined, the noun form of which is refinement. I also referred to goal identification and inferred the refinement of identification. This suggests that transmutation of identification involves its refinement. Now consider our former topic involving sense of self-identification. We talked about a transmutation of sense of self-identification. On one connotation, generally stated, the transmutation is from lower self to higher self. But on another, it is from lower planes to higher ones. And on either connotation, it is a matter of conscious refinement. To continue with alchemical terminology, it's a matter of removing the dross or the slag from the real metal and then raising the metal to a higher form. Refinement. Maybe that helps with understanding more about this thing about planes and self-identification too. Not what I just said. Maybe it helps. Well, this might be the first time you have encountered goal and motive refinement to this extent. The resultant effectiveness of all your later effort ontologically and logically starts here. And in fact, motives create interest. So one immediately tangible result will be your interest in continuing on with all that it takes to achieve your goals. You want maximum results from a solution that meets the earlier stated 13 criteria. Remember that? Those necessary conditions. Commonplace goal and motive awareness is not good enough for that. So, how clearly can you currently state or define your goals to yourself? How precisely formulated are they right now? If it really is important to you, and if you're going to continue doing what it takes to actualize them, now is the time to precisely define where you're headed. Especially when it comes to personal evolution and maximum performance in that. Or maximum performance in anything that requires some personal involvement, which it does. In fact, now is the time to do more than precisely define it. It's the time to refine it. To take it to the higher mental plane by removing the clutter and then by raising it to a higher form. That way, all of your effort takes the shortest path toward the desired destination. Your interest in maintaining attention to the effort increases significantly, and you ground the effort and its results in the necessary plane of reality. So before going any further with matters we've already put into place, do the following. That's coming up here. And like I said previously, at the moment, the notion of goal refinement might appear to involve trite rigmarole. If so, ignore that appearance and make this goal refinement into an experience. Absorb yourself into the effort. Go at it full-heartedly and full-mindedly. Make it sort of, make it sort of sacred, Make it important. Like a personal ritual. Yeah. Sacred. Important. Personal ritual. At this point, it is important to state that I want you to listen to the rest of this video before taking any action. Whether you take a break now, come back to it another time, or continue all the way through right now before actually doing anything that is said here, that is strongly suggested. Go all the way through here so that you know what's coming up. I want you to know what you're about to do. Furthermore, once you know what it is, then wait until you're ready to do it. And then get into action. Right now, note the time point here in this video where this instruction now begins, because we're about to get started now, really. Note the time. Look down at the bottom there where it tells you how many minutes and seconds have passed by. And note the time so that you can come back to it later when you're ready. That is, unless, of course, you're ready right now. But still, note the time of the video play right now, because no matter what, I want you to hear this all the way through before you take action, like I said. And one other thing. You don't have to do this all at once when you do get started. Just take the first step. Just the first step actually might take a week or two. It could. Not necessarily, but it could. But once you get to the point where I say, get out a pen, in the section I call the Hermetic Seal, be prepared to place your most solemn attention on the completion of that final step all at one time. Make it the culmination of a process that has increasingly become personal and sacred to you. Now, getting started. At this point, I want to say that some aspects of the first step here and some aspects of the very last step of what is to follow, of all that is to follow, either in paraphrase or in direct quote, are taken from L.W. de Lawrence's The Master Key, written, I think, in 1914. You've probably already seen 2 videos of right here in Personal Evolution Part 3 from his book, the first 2 chapters. Okay. Well, it's a chapter called Motives Create Interest. I have either paraphrased a little or taken some direct quotes here in the first step and then all the way down to the last step. Both of those steps, some portions are taken from him either in paraphrase or direct quote. I just want to give credit where credit is due. Now, pause a moment and think. And I need to come over here to this computer and get something for you that corresponds here. I want you to recall, please. Just a second. Okay. I want you to recall that you now have made an informed decision to go ahead with your personal involvement and perhaps through following this course of training here. Okay. This indicates the earnestness of your desire for a stronger will. I don't know if you knew that, but it does. While making your decision, you also thought about your goals associated with this training. You've thought about them for at least a moment. just right here in this video. But no doubt you've given thought to this sort of thing many times, at least in the back of your mind, rolling around. What is it that you want out of this kind of thing? I mean, where are you going with it? So you've not only made an informed decision, you've also mentally examined your reasons for it. Now, this exercise holds vital importance, and you must perform its entirety with great care and attention. So allow your earnestness of your desire for a stronger will to form the foundation for this exercise. Just for this exercise. Okay? Well, why do I say that? I say it because in creating your list of motivating goals, in purifying and transmuting them, and creating your list of motivating goals, you are laying down the foundation for all your further training, for all your further work in achievement and personal involvement. You're laying down the foundation, but upon what foundation will you lay it? The answer is, upon your earnestness of your desire for a stronger will, a stronger use of universal will. Upon your earnestness of your desire for that. To explain further, bring to mind a basic formula connecting mind training, let's say, to achievement. Achievement traces all the way back a chain of necessary conditions to motive, which itself requires desire. Peak achievement or maximum performance requires the willful, systematic, focused learning and application of such facts. Bear in mind also that conscious attention requires the direction of will, and desire can direct will. So the power of will is required to drive the whole picture. But upon one investigation, will do the driving toward your utmost success with this program. The earnestness of your very desire for a stronger will. Your success in concentration, mental discipline, and will culture largely depends upon the strength and earnestness of your motives. And that last sentence is a quote by L.W. de Lawrence in The Master Key, 1914, page 44. I'll say it again. Your success largely depends upon the strength and earnestness of your motives. Think attentively about what you're doing. Remember the basic formula. Maximum performance or achievement requires concentration. Concentration requires attention. Attention requires interest. Interest requires motive, which requires desire, and attention requires the direction of will. In creating, refining, and transmuting, and sealing your list of motivating goals, and in doing it right now at the start, you are proceeding logically and in accordance with the way things actually work. And in doing so, you're not only learning and applying the mental mechanics of this kind of achievement along these lines, you are also applying those same mechanics to the work you're doing. Consider how this works. Consider that in this exercise, you are laying down the very foundation for your maximum performance in achievement and performance training. Your list of motivating goals will set out your true interest in the entire endeavor and in your personal evolvement and your personal evolution, however you want to state it. And remember, attention requires interest. And as you can correctly imagine, while this training increasingly gives you control over your attention, it also requires your attention. With your list of motivating goals, you inherently have the interest required to maintain the necessary attention. While you are learning the training, you are using the training on the training, all at the same time, right away. Instant results. Now, before you start, I want you to recall, if you've seen it elsewhere on my channel here, full, complete breathing. If you haven't, I'll quickly explain what it is. It is an exhale from the top down, rhythmically, evenly paced, comfortably paced, just an unbroken, evenly paced, slow breath out, pressing down, 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 all the way until all your air is out. And then, right away, slowly, same pace, comfortably, back in, starting filling up at the bottom, all the way up, slowly all the way up by the control of your muscles, by way of control of your mind, all the way until all the air is in. And then back out slowly. Out, in, out, in, out, in 3 times with fullest possible attention on what you are doing. And then I want you to also have at hand a simple relaxation exercise that you can do while seated with your feet flat on the floor and your eyes closed, just like when you're doing the 3 full breaths, your abdominal breaths. Something relaxing, something to relax, a relaxation exercise, such as breathing normally, and as you breathe in a nice, even, slow manner, just breathe in relaxation, whatever it is you do. Picture yourself being relaxed. Let your muscles relax, one muscle group at a time. Something to relax. And if you know the calm confidence technique, which came before this video, or at least at this point in my posting and things, it comes before calm confidence. Have at your hand, have at your disposal the ability to some extent, summon a mood of calm confidence. Okay, so before you start, have these things at hand and be ready to perform them. And now, and like I say, get through all of this before you do anything. Come back to this when you're ready. But I want you to know what you're doing before you go and do anything, all right? Get out a piece of paper and a pencil, not a pen. Be seated, get comfortable, establish in your mind that what you are about to do is that what you're about to write is vital to your life. After all, consider the possible consequences of never having sought anything having to do with personal involvement or achievement in life. Just consider the consequences of never having sought any of that, and now compare that with your current endeavors. And consider the vitalness of your current endeavors in comparison. It is vital. What you are about is vital to your life. So here we go. Now consider your goals with respect to achievement and personal evolution. Bear in mind all that you strive for and steps along the way. Think of your connection with humanity. Think of your work. Even think of thought forms if you have awareness of what they are. Consider all of these things when considering your goals with respect to achievement and personal evolution. If you have come to this point due to awareness of what we call war on consciousness, for example, bring your associated goals to mind here. Consider all aspects of your life. And the first step is to just scribble out a rough statement about these goals, what they are. What do you want to achieve? Just get it all onto paper. Just scribble it out. One at a time, one thing at a time. Do that. Do it now. When you get to it, when you come back to this and you're ready. Now, this might actually take a number of days. It might take a number of hours. It might take a number of days. It might take a number of weeks to get done as you think of things to add. But don't worry about altering them, revising them, editing them. No. Get them onto paper. Scribble them out. Doesn't matter how they look, and do it in pencil. Now, put them in terms of things that you either, one, know will come about in the course of developed use of willpower and concentration, or in the course of increased mental discipline and achievement work, or in the course of personal evolution, things that you know will come about. In these cases of certainty over result, start your scribbles with the words, I will. I will do this. This will happen. I will, ... fill in the blank. Or number two, put them in terms of things that you, in the case of things that you desire or hope or aim to come about, but you're not sure will happen, but they are things that you would like to come about, that you're aiming for, or that you desire to have happen, but aren't things that you know for sure will happen. Start your scribbles with the words, I desire to, or I desire, and then fill in the blank. Those are the only requirements for getting these things scribbled down. Start them either with, I will, or I desire to, or I desire. Now, here are some things to consider making part of your list. I want to read a couple off here, and I would like you to bear in mind as you come back through here, maybe a second time, you might have to come back through this a third or fourth time actually before you really get to the work. But I would like you to consider adding these to your list. Here are some suggested ones that are probably pretty good for anybody interested in achievement and personal evolution. Just a couple. Here's one. I will gain greater strength of character. As you may know, character, evolving character, evolutions of character have to do with very deep work and have the effect of changing your sense of choices in life, such that while still under cause and effect at work, your choices, the choices that you have before you, and which one of those you will choose, those are matters of character. And evolving character evolves the choices that you have before you, as well as your choices among your decisions among those choices. So this is one of the secrets to self-evolvement or self-determination. So this is a good one here. I will gain greater strength of character, so that my every thought, word, and action will be characterized with more power and purpose. There's one suggestion you might want to include. Here is another one. I will become more able to help those around me. Now, at some point, if you use this one, you will want to mention the names of definite individuals. Although this can be, as you will see, this may break into a general statement for the welfare of all humanity as well, but that's a different statement. I will become more able to help those around me. Mention the names of definite individuals, as this will make your motive more interesting and personal. Besides, having thought of others will keep exercising, having thought of others will keep your exercise from being a self-centered practice. We'll deal more with that too. That stuff will get weeded out. Here's another one. A good suggestion for you. I will gain greater self-control and self-reliance. Here's another. I will gain greater control over my feelings and emotional states. And another. My personal appearance will be greatly improved. My mouth and jaw will be stronger and firmer, and my whole bearing will denote greater self-confidence and strength of character. And another. My powers of concentration will be enormously developed. Remember, it's up to you to put these in terms of I will or I desire to. In rare cases, you can leave them without those prefixes, those first couple of words, like my powers of concentration will be enormously developed. But if you want to put it more in terms of I will or I desire to, that is fine too. But the will is in there. My powers of concentration will be enormously developed. It's there. And what else might be suggested? One more. I desire to create for myself an independent position in life. I desire to. There it is. I desire to create for myself an independent position in life. Now, mention a definite position. Now, this could be an independent position means a position of freedom from some circumstance or circumstances, usually something undesirable. For example, a position of freedom from the grip of another person's control tactics. Think war on consciousness here, for example. Or from financial limitations, or from tobacco use, from dark moods, from troubling thoughts. An independent position in life doesn't just mean physical wealth. All right. Let me put this aside again. There's still work to do. Lots of work to do here. All right. Now here we go. Purification, a bit of hermetic art. This is what to do once you get all this stuff scribbled down. You're ready to take the next step. You've got everything down there that you want. Remembering, of course, that at any time in the future of your life, you can come back to this list and add things as they come up because you will evolve. Some things may become irrelevant after a while, and you can take them out. So this is a dynamic thing, but it's going to reach a point of finished by the end of this video. Later on, it may be evolved further. But if you've done this right, it'll probably take quite a while for any changes to take place. Purification. Now this breaks into several subcategories, and the first one is clarification. Clarification is a subcategory of purification. Right? The first main thing we're going to do is purify. Remember how the alchemical process works? Purification comes first. You cannot transmute until there's been purification. So the first kind of purification we're going to do is clarification. And the first kind of clarification we're going to do is delineation. Take a look at what you scribbled down. Start with the first item and follow through with all of them, as I lay it out to be done with just one of them here. We're going to just pretend there's only one, but you follow through this process with all of them. Go through them all, doing each one, doing all of them. Just take one next step here, like delineation, and go through everything you've written down and delineate them. And then go to the next step and go through all of them that are written down. Okay. but I'm just going to pretend there's only one. So start with the first item and follow through with all of them as I lay it out to be done with just one. However, if you analyze your goal, let's say you're looking at the first one. If you analyze your goal, you will notice that it can be broken down into various parts, such that you might say that they are sub-goals, these parts. Call it whatever you want. The further you can break down the general goal into separate ones, the better. So scribble them out. Scribble them down. Take one, analyze it. That means break it into its component parts. Okay? And make each one a separate thing in writing. You only have to do just still scribble. We're just breaking apart, delineating the scribbled things that you wrote down, right, into parts, component parts, making each one its own thing, still scribbled. That's delineation. And it has a clarifying effect. That is part of the refinement that we are after. You might be able to make a half a dozen or more out of one or two rough statements. So you will end up with a list of goals written down, not just a goal. And of course, we're just pretending you only had one to start with, but there were more. Do this with all of them. Go ahead and do that. That's delineation. Next step, once that's done, the next step in clarification, which is the first step in purification, the next step in clarification is called precision. From the point you're at now, rewrite. Still in pencil, no pen. Pay close attention to how you word things now. Purify your terminology with precision. Clarify, therefore purify, with precision. Pay close attention to how you word things. Use exacting terms now. That's the next step. Now, if you have a little trouble finding the precise words or deciding on which words to use, then you have, in fact, you do not yet have the goal clear in your mind. At this point already, it should be becoming evident to you that while you might have at first thought that you know exactly where you're going in your life, if you don't, if you are having trouble finding the right words, the precise words, or in deciding which words to use, then you in fact do not yet have the goal clear in your mind. Remember, we're clarifying. If there's any trouble with it, it wasn't clear yet, but it's going to be. Work it out. You might have to rewrite each one a few times. It's not that difficult, really, because you already do have some level of clarity over what you want to achieve. We're just making it more precise. Okay. Right now, I just want you to get it all spelled out precisely, word for word, with your whole being thrown into the act. Like you intend at some point to willfully and consciously engrave these words into your subconscious mind and into your will itself. You'll remember, earlier I said that when I give an instruction, and when I give a strong suggestion, and I say, do this, or put your mind to this, pay attention to that, I mean literally do that, fully. It's part of the game. Don't cheat yourself. This is your life. This is your personal evolvement. And this is your achievement. This is your personal involvement in achievement, and this is your achievement in personal involvement. Don't cheat yourself. How do you select the words for precision? You select them by their meanings. The meaning of a word is important because it is what the word denotes or refers to in reality. Consider that each of your words refers to something in reality, even if what it refers to is a logical or a linguistic function, such as in the case of the word and. Go ahead and rewrite, carefully selecting precise words now. All right, that's clarification. Now at this point, just want to make a note about awareness and feeling, and then we'll move on to the next step. With that in place, consider the following. Notice that your attention is now on the meanings of the words you have chosen. And you will feel, yes, feel, that your relevant overall goal or goals stand clearer in your mind than before, because we just clarified them. You have objectified your goal or goals onto paper, enabling you to purify them somewhat by clarifying them, which you have done by carefully delineating and selecting its components with precision. Be aware of the clarity, and I mean literally, be aware of the clarity, and find the feeling of that clarity inside you and feel it. Literally. Do that. And if this is the point at which you're going through with action here in this video, do it now. Act now. Next step. Affirmativization. There's more purifying to be done. We've done the clarification. Now we're going to purify more in the next step after clarification. This is called affirmativization. Ask a few questions about what you now have before you. First, ask, do any of the meanings of my selected words involve things that I, in fact, do not want? Things that aren't really part of my goal. Repression of emotions, for example. If you wrote in there something about repression of emotions, is that part of your goal? To repress emotions, no matter whether you wrote the word not in front of it or not. Do you have something in there, any phrase or word that isn't what you want? Don't allow mention of anything like that in your list, even as something that you don't want to accomplish. Don't write it in there as something you don't want to have done, or that you don't want to have happen, or that you don't want to be the result. Take any such wording out. Take it out. You don't want it in there. So if your selected words include something like without repression, or any words that involve not this or not that, or any others that denote something you don't actually want to accomplish, or aren't actually driving you to action, go back and make sure that every word refers to what you do in fact want to accomplish. Here's a bit of the involved reasoning. Your subconscious mind does not pay much attention to the not in a phrase like not repression, or no repression, or without repression. It doesn't pay much attention to the not. It pays attention to the feeling associated with repression, the word repression, and what it means. It pays attention, to the feeling associated with what repression means, as denoted by the word repression. It pays attention to the feeling. It doesn't pay attention to the not. It pays attention to the feeling associated with the word repression in the phrase not or without repression. And with respect to your goal, that feeling is a negative one, right? Your subconscious mind responds to that feeling because it is a feeling and because it is one that runs counter to your goal. Your subconscious mind then tends to work against you with respect to what it is you do in fact want. It can actually draw you toward repression, at least by not drawing you toward not repression. State only your goals with every word. That is being affirmative. Again, your subconscious mind largely ignores the not and pays attention to the feelings and their actual objects. The object of the example feeling here is repression, not the logical connector not. By now you begin to see why it was the case that up to the outset here you probably could make good use of goal definition refinement. You might suddenly realize that up to now your goal definition had included a lot of what you didn't want. And this will not do anymore. So take care of it now. Next step. And we'll make sure that you're maintaining precision here in a moment. The next step is called to tell the truth. This is still part of refinement. Okay, that done. Next, ask yourself, is everything I now have written true? This is similar to affirmativization, but not quite. So this step might not apply to absolutely everything you have there, but we need to run through and make a thorough examination and apply this where it can be applied. Is everything I now have written true? For example, did you write something like, I do not develop cumulative stress over close contact with other people's traumatic experiences? Something like, I desire to not develop cumulative stress. Well, there's still the word not, but of course that statement violates the previous step about affirmativization. Yes, but the immediate point is that the statement is probably untrue for you right now. You say in this statement, I do not develop cumulative stress over close contact with other people's traumatic experiences. If you wrote something like that, you haven't really followed the rules so far, and you actually wrote something that is not currently true. If your goal is to have no cumulative stress over close contact with other people's traumatic experiences, and you wrote something along the lines of, I do not develop cumulative stress, in the manner that we are often advised to state our affirmations, this is a different thing here. We're not doing that right now. This is something, we want our statements to be true now. This is a very good reason why I strongly suggest to, as much as possible, include the words I will, if something is certain, or I desire to. This makes them true. Or perhaps you wrote something like, within 1 year I will have completely overcome a tendency to be bothered by horrible mental images of others' tragedies. If you wrote something like that, then you wrote something that you do not know for sure is true. In either case, change what you wrote to make it currently true. But be aware that you can begin a statement with the words, I will, but only if it involves something that you know for sure will be the case. For example, if you are involving yourself in attention training, which if you are doing this exercise right here with complete attention to the best of your ability, you are improving your attention. So you can say, in 1 year, my attention will be significantly improved. And if you follow through with this training, with this program, that will be the case. Well, that's something you can pretty much count on. Or if you are involving yourself in personal evolution, steps toward personal evolution, and you know that the steps are going to work for you, they're going to move you in that direction, then you know that you will personally evolve. These are things you can be certain of. As certain as if you get in a car and turn the key and all the mechanics work and you have gas in the car and the electrical system works and there's nothing wrong with your car, it's going to start and you're going to get somewhere. Barring the laws of physics and electromechanics suddenly going astray on us. Otherwise, it's quite useful to start each statement with something like, I desire to. That makes them true right now. If in fact that's true. That you do desire to such and so. Whatever it takes to make the truth value of each one of your written statements true, do it now. All right. That all having been done, now we're ready to move on to transmuting. That's purification. That was purification. Now we can transmute. A bit more hermetic art. Your list is now purified. It is clarified. It's precise. By the way, before moving on, go back and make sure that all your words are precise now again. Maintain your precision. Okay. At this point, go back and maintain your precision. Make sure your words are precise because you may have changed some words around now. Maintain your precision at this point. And now your list is purified. It's clarified, it's precise, it's affirmative, and it's true. The real metal is exposed, so to speak, by having removed the slag of ambiguity, denial, irrelevance, and falsity. You like that? I'll say that again. The real metal is exposed by having removed the slag of ambiguity, denial, irrelevance, and falsity. We now want to transmute your purified list into its highest, most lasting, and most usable form. Notice again, of course, that I'm using the alchemical terms purify and transmute as the two phases of your goal refinement. For as I previously indicated, it will benefit you to gain hands-on experience with the processes they denote. Traditionally, transmute largely denotes our into its highest here. I just said, right? Into its highest, most lasting, most usable form. Traditionally, transmute largely denotes our into its highest phrase. But for our purposes, the three, highest, most lasting, and most usable, blend together anyway. As well they should, because that's good pragmatism. And by the way, you cannot transmute the impure. But in my opinion, the two processes are not entirely unique to one another. Allow the preceding paragraph that I just stated to serve as a suggestion that you are engaging in an alchemical transmutation process here. Let it in. Allow in that suggestion. Come on, open up and let it in. Allow in the suggestion that you're engaging in an alchemical transmutation process here. You're doing it. Let that suggestion sink down into your brainstem. And from there, down your spine and out through your whole body. I'm going to tell you that again. Allow the preceding paragraph, this bit about goal refinement and transmutation to the highest, most lasting, and most usable form, your list, your purified list, into its highest, most lasting, and most usable form, just being good pragmatism, the way they work together, to serve as a suggestion that you are engaging in an alchemical transmutation process. Let that suggestion sink into your brainstem and down your spine and out through your whole body, and command your subconscious mind to let that in. Feel it. Here's one of those times, as all here, when I say do this or, feel this, attend to that, literally do it. It's something to do with utmost care. Feel that sinking in to your subconscious mind. Feel it. A feeling and awareness that it's happening. Feel it. There's a feeling that goes with that. Letting it sink in, and the command for your subconscious mind to let that suggestion in and sink in. Feel it sinking in, and then trust that it's sunk in. This is part of how this all works. The more you practice this kind of thing, the better you're going to get at it. The quicker you'll be able to do it, the more effective it will be, and the more efficiently it will operate, and the more profound will be the results. Start with this right now. This is where it all begins, with this list that you are creating now. And with this is where it starts. Trust that it's sunk in. And now, the next step. Ethicalization. Remember, we're transmuting now. With this awareness that's sunk in to your subconscious mind and out through your whole body. And that you feel from that point now, we're engaging in transmutation. The first step is ethicalization. Commence with raising the list to its highest, most lasting, and most usable form by first asking, does what I have written involve only actions or results that I would want everybody in the world to engage in if they were in my shoes? Let me repeat that. Ethicalization. Commence with raising the list to its highest, most lasting, and most usable form by first asking, does what I have now written involve only actions or results that I would want everybody in the world to engage in if they were in my shoes? If the answer is yes, good. If no, to any part, then change that part now. That makes it ethical, which is in your own best interest. When done, maintain your precision. When done with that, the next step in transmutation is motivation. Ask yourself, does each thing that I have written, does the feeling I get from it include a motivating factor for me? Does it include a motivating factor for me? That is, does it feel like it pushes me towards some action? Said another way, does the meaning of what I wrote incite within me some positive emotional response? In each case, with each item in the list, that is now not only purified but ethicalized. Now go through that list, that purified and ethicalized list, okay? Each item, and ask, does the feeling I get from it include a motivating factor for me? Does it feel like it pushes me towards some action? Does the meaning of what I wrote incite within me some positive emotional response? If it doesn't, then something is not quite up to snuff for the intended purposes here. A positive emotional response that pushes me towards some action. If it doesn't, then something isn't quite up to snuff for the intended purposes here. In that case, to the best of your ability, change each item so that it does give you a feeling of positive emotional response that includes or that pushes you towards some action. To the best of your ability. You might not be able to do it with every item. Do it to the best of your ability with each one. Now, why do I bring up motivation? Let me count the ways. The reasons. Well, goals and motives aren't exactly the same thing. The terms are not quite synonymous. So what's the deal here? Well, for one, if you know about thought forms, you'll know that motive plays an important role in them. And if you know about karma and its relation to thought forms, well, that expands the whole idea even further, because motive plays such an important role, not just in thought forms, but in the thought form's role in karma. And that's kind of like one of the big things we're working with here. The whole cause and effect thing, especially in the big picture of cause and effect across lifetimes or across a life cycle, this is not just planning and working for your personal evolvement now, but personal evolvement just kind of inherently includes the idea that it's something that goes on and on and on and on and on and on, right? Setting forth our motives here, making sure that where we're going is something that actually involves some kind of positive emotional response for us that drives us to action along those lines, kind of fits in here, doesn't it? Yes. Yes. And of course, we want the motivating side of our work here to be ethical as well, right? So we're doing this once we have ethicalized our goals. Now we want to make sure that there's some kind of a positive emotional response associated with each that kind of drives us to action to the best of our ability. Of course, while maintaining the ethicality, which is already written in. Okay? Part of the deal has to do with the fact that they aren't the same thing, goals and motives. A goal is not necessarily a motive, or is not necessarily motivating. And a motive is not necessarily a goal. But a goal can involve motive. A goal can motivate or not. It depends on how you define the goal, which depends on how linked it is in your mind with a related motive. So goal and motive can blend into one statement. All that it takes for something to serve emotively is that it involves emotional content to the point of driving you to some kind of, giving you the feeling that it drives you to some kind of action. Usually such content pushes us to action. It is quite useful here for the goals to also serve as motives in several ways. For one, they keep you interested in doing what it takes to actualize them. Recall that we want to transmute the goals into their most usable form. Remember that part? The highest, most usable, and most lasting. Make the necessary changes to your list now. Just do the best that you can. And then maintain precision. Our next step in transmutation is called idealization. With that done, to the best of your ability, the last step, now then ask another question. Does what I wrote refer to ideals? That is each goal stated in ideal form? If you wrote, let's say, for example, I desire to significantly improve at helping people without suffering later. Well, that's not only non-precise, but is far from ideal. For one, it refers to suffering, which is not very ideal, and it carries with it a negative or unlikable feeling. Kind of violates one of those earlier steps, right? And again, though without suffering isn't affirmative, that was the earlier step that it's in violation of. And all of that's less than ideal. But those points have already been discussed, albeit not in terms of idealism. The more important immediate point here is that the word significantly improve in the statement, I desire to significantly improve at helping people without suffering later. Significantly improve refers only to improving rather than to doing something perfectly. Improvement, even significant improvement, is not ideal. Perfection is. Make your motivating goals ideal in writing. Change their wording to idealized form. Make them ultimate. Make them statements of the best, the highest degree, at least so that further down the road, that aspect of them needs no revision. For you evolved the highest standards. You evolved to the highest standards in the first place here. State them now in their ideal form. And then maintain precision. Now here's an instrumental note about idealizing, involving an action to take, if it applies to you. See, with that done, consider some of the characteristics of this idealization part of your goal refinement. You're not just introducing your subconscious mind to these consciously and carefully formulated ideals. You also are doing so by tapping into and starting to identify with the part of your being where these ideals in fact are real and existent. So this applies to you, yes. Let me state this again. Consider some of the characteristics of this idealization part of your goal refinement. You are not just introducing into your subconscious mind these consciously and carefully formulated ideals. Listen to what else you're doing. Check this out. You are doing so by tapping into and starting to identify with the part of your being where these ideals, in fact, are real and existent. That is, you attentively are drawing out from the real within you the idealized form of where you are headed in mundane applications. Making that idealized form fully conscious and then willfully inscribing it into your depths again. Full circle. I want you to, here's something to do. Mentally picture that circle happening, because that's the action taking place here with this. If you need to, go back and listen to this last thing again here. Mentally picture that circle taking place. Do it now when you're coming through and actually going through these steps. That is. Additional characteristics. I said, with that done, consider some of the characteristics of this idealization part of your goal refinement. Additional characteristics are that this draws something within you, something at the higher mental plane level, from potential toward actual, from passive toward active. And it brings multiple planes of your being into harmony over the matter at hand, and therefore with no perceptual conflict among those planes. Idealizing is very transmuting. And I want you to listen to this explanation here, these last couple of paragraphs, several times. I want you to get this idea. I want you to know how this is working. And I want you to picture it happening in your head, in your mind. And I want you to feel it. I want you to feel it happening. I want you to be consciously aware of it and to feel it and to intend it with attention. If you are fully content with the result of this step, skip the immediately following subsection while you are working and come back to it later just for your information. But if you say, there is some perceptual conflict here. What if a few items in my list are now untrue because I'm not after the ideal? Or what if I don't believe ideals can ever manifest except as ideals qua ideals in and of themselves, but they can't really ever manifest? What if that's getting in my way here? Or what if I think ideals are bunk anyhow? Or what if I think they are unattainable and now I don't feel good about my goals? If you have any of these questions, then follow through here because I'm going to address them. These are good questions. If you have any of them, if any of them are somehow getting in the way of your transmutation here with this idealization. First, just to clarify the answer to a potential question at this point. Even if you think ideals are real enough, not bunk, and you feel attracted to your listed ones, then the idealized form of your goals is no less true than before. That is due to having previously made their less idealized form true. Making the goal into an ideal does not change its truth, and all is well with respect to that. Okay? That was a possible question you could have had. Now, with that said, if after having idealized your goals that you find that you are not attracted to them now, that is, you're not after the ideal, and so now some of your goals are no longer true because of that, then you must either A, change them to a less idealized form, right? Or B, refine what you really want so that it corresponds with what you now have produced on paper. It's not one or the other. Well, the recommendation here was to idealize your goals, right? The consequent implication is that if, as things stand, you are not after the ideals now that you can see them on paper, well, maybe you should try to figure out why. And see whether you can discredit your reasoning along those lines. And adopt higher standards. Thereby accomplishing B, refining what you really want so that it corresponds with what you now have produced on paper. And to help with this, go back and listen to an earlier part of this video when I said, right here is an instrumental note about idealizing involving an action. To help further, your goals should reflect the very highest degree of attainment. Excuse me. That way, they remain always before you. You can always work toward them. Otherwise, you might have to rewrite them later. Besides, why sell yourself short on them? Why set your sights on lower mind limitation ideas? Excuse me. Why do that? Excuse me. I need a drink. I think I've been talking for a little while. Oh, a little root beer. And that was really rude of me, wasn't it? I needed a drink right now. Didn't want to go get a glass. I didn't want to get up. But, so I drank right out of the bottle there. Oh, that feels a little better. Getting my voice back again. Okay. Oh, that was a less than ideal state of affairs, wasn't it? The recommendation here was to idealize your goals. Now, why sell yourself short on them? Why set your sights on lower mind limitation ideas? Doing so is unnecessary. And it's limiting. You want to achieve the highest level. You want to personally evolve efficiently and effectively. If you cannot accept this line of reasoning right now, then reduce your goal definitions from the ideal downward, but only to the point where they are again true for you right now. That would produce the most idealized form of them that is true for you right now. So if, quote, done perfectly, as a phrase in your list, is unacceptable to you, then perhaps done nearly perfectly is. Reduce it down to that point. That's more idealized than something like significantly improve. Remember, we were talking about that phrase in the first place here as an example. Done nearly perfectly is somewhere between significantly improve and done perfectly. So just back off if you have to make your goal true. Back off from the most idealized form down to just where it's true again for you. Now, by the way, notice that done nearly perfectly and significantly improve, while limiting, have no clear end. How much is nearly or significantly? Those are not precise terms. But perfectly, the word perfectly, while not limiting, is a precise term. That's ideal. Next, what if you don't even believe in any notion of ideals? Such that the phrase, the statement, the proposition, the most idealized form of them that is true for you right now, isn't even a valid notion for you. Well, that objection actually carries little weight. For when you made sure that your list was true, it already approximated some notion of idealized form that is true for you. Few people deny all notions of idealism. I don't think you have this problem. Next, now here's a big one for some people. What if the notion of fully idealized form turns you off because now you view your goals as unattainable? That's different than taking them to be untrue. But all the same, if you take them as unattainable, they could generate a negative response in you. This would mean that while a goal statement might be true, attaining the goal seems like a farce to you. In that case, you probably have missed the point and got lost. People often say, Set attainable goals. They must be attainable. No ideals because they are unattainable. Well, how limiting? How lower-minded? Aren't we after getting beyond that? I suppose such thinking might be practical for some applications, but not for this one. This application involves something that requires a major shift, remember? Remember that? All the way back to the beginning here? A leap, a jump, a major shift. We have to reach into higher levels of mind here. Intellect may tell us, oh, ideals are unattainable. Experience, our sensory experience with the outside world might tell us, oh, ideals are unattainable. We're reaching into higher levels of mind here. We're going for, this application involves something that requires a major shift, remember? Personal evolution. Higher state. Sense of identity at a higher plane. All of these things that I have set up to this moment count here. We have to reach into higher levels of mind here. One reason why many people have not solved the problem implied by the original, by an original state of affairs, such as, let's say, once again, back to our little example of somebody in an emergency medical technician field, and they're having trouble coping healthily with what they deal with on a daily basis, or you know, in their career, right? Is that they haven't reached beyond intellect into higher levels of mind. Their intellects tell them that ideals are unattainable and therefore make irrational goals. Can you see the mechanism at work behind what we mean when we say being bound by limitation? The intellect is limited, and it knows limitation, and it convinces us of it, all within sound reason. The higher mind, however, knows no such bounds. This is not to put down the intellect and its reasoning power. No, it serves a wonderful purpose. Its reasoning faculty protects us from thought errors. It just can't see everything. Interestingly, when we get something from the higher mind and let it in and accept it, and the intellect considers it for a while, it decides that the new thought is a great one after all. I mean, after all, there is a lot of sense in making our goals ideal. But only if we have truly got the ideal from the reality of the higher mind, rather than merely come up with it as an intellectual exercise. So, if you're going about this as an intellectual exercise, you need to go back and start over again and do it as I actually have said to do it. I paid attention to the details at every point with action. The limits must dissolve. They must be realized to not truly exist in and of themselves. They dissolve in the light of the higher mind where perfection really exists. To intentionally and consciously do what seems impossible requires the dissolution of assumed limits. The dissolution is usually not sufficient, but it is necessary. We either set our sights for the very highest and plot the course accordingly, or eventually we have to revise our limited sights as we slowly approach their limits. We want the very highest from the start. This does not mean that we will necessarily get there in this lifetime, and that's okay. We do not need that limit in our consideration here. After all, we do not know how long this lifetime will last anyway. It could end tomorrow, and our plan to buy a car next week would not even happen. Or by some fluke, it could last 200 years. And if we adopt the truer notion that we have more lifetimes ahead and break free of the limiting idea that our goals have to apply to this physical lifespan only, the possibilities get blown wide open. One thing is for sure, though. Doubt will bar the way. None of this means that we ignore setting intermediate, clearly doable objectives that plot the course toward the goal. Aha! If we choose key objectives involving methods that provide for limitless progress, we're good to go. We must not only intimately set our goals in ink, we must pencil in our course. And right now you happen to be on the course of penciling goal refinement. But how can we plot a course such that it does not limit us if we direct it towards some limited end? That is important to understand. This entire discourse is about the plot. Idealized goals are part of the plot. They literally take part in the action. Recall, we want goals of the highest, most lasting, and most usable form. If you had any of the above objections to idealization, and you lowered your written standards when I suggested you do so, to make them true, to keep them true, by now you've got past your objection. But now you've got past your objection, given what I've said here, change your written true goals back to idealized form again, now, to the fullest extent. All right. That was idealization. Preparing for the final transmuting step. Occult insight and feeling. Now a little break from the immediate activity. I think you understand the kind of thought process is going on here when I point out observations such as the ones in the immediately preceding paragraphs about idealizing your goals. You're starting to catch on if you weren't already in pretty good understanding of such things. Perhaps your understanding is improving here as we go. I hope so. Well, practice similar thought processes about all the information throughout this entire discourse. You'll gain tremendous insight into how things work when they actually do work. Like I said at the outset, we must get into some fundamental principles about how things work right from the start. It's part of the game. We want to get a basic understanding of how things work and the structure and cause of the cosmos and our relation to it. We talked about will, we talked about self, we talked about mind, we talked about sense of identity, we talked about the absolute causeless cause of all being beyond all space and time. We talked about our complete dependence, as the individual, complete dependence upon the universal. We've talked about all of these affairs. We've talked about subconscious mind. We've talked about transmutation. We've talked about purification. We've talked about so many things, okay? These and motives and goals. With respect to motives and goals, action, all right? Logical starting points, all converging together and working with a knowledge of how it works and why it works and intending it to be in place in our full conscious awareness like that. Okay? You may gain tremendous insight into how things work when they actually do work. You'll gain tremendous insight into the principles underlying outer affairs. In this case, writing your idealized goals on paper was just an outer affair. There was plenty going on behind the scenes. Writing them on the paper was just the outer affair. You possibly remember earlier I mentioned about there's the outer affair and then there's the inner affair. And it's the inner part that's doing the majority of the work. And part of the game, a big major part of the game, is knowing what's going on in the inner side and intentionally employing those inner workings. The writing on paper, all of this work on paper, was the outer affair. There is plenty going on behind the scenes. And we've been discussing a lot of it as we go. There is always plenty going on behind the scenes. And the more you're aware of it, the more it goes on. And the more intentionally you can make it happen, which in turn makes it go on even more. More pointedly, more clearly, more definedly, more potently. More directedly. Throw into the mix your fullest possible attention, and the thing gains more power. Feel what is happening, and it comes more alive. Consider the meaning of each word in a verbal description of whatever is happening, and the affair gains depth. Add in clear mental pictures of it going on, and magic rolls forth. Add repetition to the entire recipe, and it turns into a freight train. But where is it going? Beware of such freight trains that have no refined destinations. There's a lot in that last paragraph. And for now, just remember the gist of it, and later on come back to it and use what it says to do on the information in it. For example, study it, and as you do, place your full attention on it and picture what it says repetitively. This manner of thinking in which you are engaged is that of an occult philosopher. And the work that you are doing here, well, it involves acting like one. Together, the thinking and the doing involve being one. And it's a far cry from armchair speculative philosophizing. This is also being a practical psychologist. At the occult level of relevant affairs, the distinction between philosophy and psychology blurs. And for that matter, at any level, many divisions blur. At the ultimate core of affairs, all divisions are an outer appearance. Now, I'll point out a lot of these sorts of things as we go on here, but I can't state them all. Whether I point them out or you figure them out for yourself, in either case, take a moment to absorb the insights and feel their meaning and significance. Feel their meaning and their significance. And right there, I verbally italicized the word feel. That's another opportunity to gain some further insight. Whether I point these kinds of things out, this manner of thinking, this whole general manner of thinking, whether I point some things out like along these lines or you figure them out for yourself, take a moment to absorb the insights and to feel their meaning and significance. And that right there, taking a moment, the very idea of taking a moment to feel such things, meanings, and significance is another opportunity to gain some more insight in itself about that. Now, there must be some reason why I repeatedly emphasize feeling something. And in this immediate case, it is something that people ordinarily would not pay much attention to. Given all that you know so far, what is so important about feeling? What might be significant about not just having an insight and contemplating its significance, but also feeling its significance and its meaning? How might the answer apply to attaining your goals? Well, as you consider that, just for now, easily allow into your awareness the feeling of the activity going on here in refining your goals. Right? Motion is happening. And you have awareness of its nature. Feel it. Now, finalizing the transmutation. The last step after idealization. Universalization. With all that done and your awareness absorbed in the deep level of motion going on here, back to the program. Ask a final question about the list you wrote. Is it in all of its parts stated universally? In other words, it's precise, it's affirmative, it's true, it's ethical, it's motivating, and it's idealized. But does it involve universal application? For example, does it refer only to people having heart attacks? Or only to helping them physically if other levels are relevant to your project, to your goals? Or only to your own well-being? Or does it apply to every situation? Across the board within the relevant domain of application that each statement involves. Does it apply to within the relevant domain of application, across the board within the relevant domain of application, let's say, not just as you perceive it to be currently the case, but might apply in the future? Is it universally applicable? If not, then change it so that to the best of your knowledge, it never needs to be revised to involve increased application. Each statement, each item in the list. First, though, when I asked, is it stated universally? Does it involve universal application? Did the sudden awareness of the idea of universalizing your goal create a perceptible change in you, however slight? When I said that and you heard it, well, it did make a change in you. I'm asking whether you perceived it. If so, then what did it feel like? Easily allow the subtle feeling again, if you can, right now, and feel it. Is it stated universally? Does it involve universal application? Now universalize your goals on paper and then maintain precision. Now reviewing the rules of goal refinement. They're delineated, precise, ethical, affirmative, true, personalized and meaningful, felt, emotionally endowed and motivating, idealized and universalized statements about what it is you're after. Those are the attributes of right, refined goals. Consider them together for a moment. all of these attributes as mere aspects of just one whole event. Consider their importance in all goal defining. Consider their importance in your current list now. What are they again? Delineated, precise, ethical, affirmative, true, personalized and meaningful, felt, emotionally endowed and motivating, idealized, and universalized. Consider them together as mere aspects of just one whole event that happened just now. And consider their importance in all goal defining. Consider their importance in your current list right now. And now prepare for the big event. Engraving the Hermetic seal. What you have accomplished is purifying and transmuting your goals on paper. Plus that circle that was going on, remember? Remember that? You should, if you felt it. While you did it, you reached corresponding levels of refinement within your own being. But what you have on paper is in pencil. The paper is a worksheet. The inner levels you reached were called on during the work. They served as the inner worksheet. Worksheets are preparatory for something else. In the outer world, the physical plane, you will now put your goals in ink. That in itself is symbolic of something going on inwardly. At the same time, in the inner world, into the deepest area you reached during the inner worksheet phase, and even deeper, you will engrave your goals. This is the most important part of the work. Consider that your goals are now endowed with life. They are endowed with consciousness. Their consciousness is the offspring of yours. They came from yours and were purified by yours and were transmuted to their highest form in the heat and the light of your higher mind, excuse me, which is fueled by the fire of your spirit, which in turn is endowed with the power and other characteristics of the universal parent consciousness. They came from all the way in there, which is also everywhere. Out through your intellect and then through your hand onto paper. The final step is to reverse the direction. It is to intentionally engrave your living, refined goals back into your depths. That is, into your subconscious mind and onto your will for real. Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes, is known as the father of alchemy, and some say the god of language. Interesting here. From his name, we have the word hermetic, which is in the phrase hermetic seal. Roughly, it means to tuck away and to seal airtight in hidden areas. With a capital H, the hermetic seal locks something into place in the hidden realms. It is an occult seal. In our case, we do not render something inaccessible. We lock it into place so that it cannot be removed. And we leave the door open for it to act and for it to grow stronger and deeper. What lies immediately before you are not only to write your transmuted goals in ink, but to hermetically seal them as stated within your deepest regions. Those reasons are now involved in waiting for that to happen because of how you did what you've already done. Just like your paper worksheet is waiting to be put into ink because of how you did what you've already done at its level. The outer writing was done with your hand. The inner engraving is done with everything else. The act has specific gravity. It is solemn. It is solemn. It has specific gravity. You have already made your goals into the highest, most lasting, most usable form. This is what you want. If you were going to put the Hermetic seal on them, this is the irreversible moment of truth. In fact, this is the irreversible moment of truth that formally kicks off everything to follow. The next section tells you how to do it. As before. This is a good breaking point if you want, but come back to it. And as before, don't get into action until you have gone through this entire video at least once, becoming familiar with the territory that it involves. And be ready with that breathing and relaxation, and if you know of it, calm confidence. The Hermetic seal. As I said, listen through this section before doing anything, just so you know for sure what you're going to be doing. And when you are ready, come back through and just do it as it says to do it. Just start when you're ready and do exactly what it says to do, bit by bit, as it unfolds in the instructions. Here goes, starting now. All the power of the universe is behind you in this. Even though it already has, ask it to join in and back you, as you are its child and its instrument. Do that now. Then get a pen, not a pencil, a pen, and fresh paper, or other media such as a paintbrush and a canvas, or for that matter, a chisel and a stone slab. Absolutely no keyboarding. As you get them, hold in your mind your true intent with them, to hermetically engrave and seal your living goals into your subconscious mind and onto your will in full view of the universe and with its seal of approval. With your writing implements before you and your worksheet before you, invoke awareness of core control. Core control. Your true self. Your I. Getting your will, your volition, to direct the movement of your hand and direct your attention and direct your intentions, all in the manners that I have just suggested, from the core of your very being. From that point of control, core control, direct your will to move your hand from the part of you that does not change. And then simply, to the best of your ability, and from that part of you, just easily direct your whole being to be thrown into the following effort. Do your breathing. Do your relaxation. Summon a mood of calm confidence. And proceed to carefully, neatly, slowly, and meaningfully, and with utmost unbroken attention, and with utmost realization of why you intentionally are doing it the way you are doing it, handwrite or handprint your final result. It must be written with the greatest care, with your earnest desire for strong willpower. Put strong will into your writing. And as you write, feel that you are engraving your desires, your motivating goals directly upon your will. This way, you will actually engrave them there, for that is how it's done. And the deeper, the better. Carefully, neatly, slowly, meaningfully, with utmost unbroken attention, with utmost realization of why you intentionally are doing it the way you are doing it. Handwrite or handprint your final result with greatest care and with your earnest desire for strong willpower. Put strong will into your writing, and as you write, feel that you are engraving your desires, your motivating goals directly upon your will. This way, you will actually engrave them there. That is how it's done, and the deeper the better. Start by writing the following title at the top. List of motivating goals. Under the title, write the following. My list of motivating goals concerns matters over which I have deep, absorbing interest and that in fact move me. My list of motivating goals concerns matters over which I have deep, absorbing interest and that in fact move me. I write and then repeat them with greatest care. I write and then repeat them with greatest care. I write and repeat them with strong will. I write and repeat them with strong will. I feel that I now engrave them into my subconscious mind. I feel that I now engrave them into my subconscious mind and upon my very will itself. And upon my very will itself, as in fact I am doing. As in fact I am doing. Next paragraph. I invoke and employ my motivating goals with earnest desire for strong use of willpower. I invoke and employ my motivating goals with earnest desire for strong use of willpower. Next paragraph. In all capital letters. I will to gain strong willpower. I will to gain strong willpower. Next paragraph. I, comma, and then your name, comma, hereby, firmly, and solemnly resolve to do my utmost to strengthen and increase my present concentration and use of willpower for the following reasons. I, and then your name, hereby firmly and solemnly resolve to do my utmost to strengthen and increase my present concentration and use of willpower for the following reasons. And then will your list that you have created to be engraved, just like you wrote that it would, into your subconscious mind and upon your will itself. Will that to happen. And now write your list, just like you wrote and willed that you would. You just wrote that you're going to engrave it upon your will. Write your list, just like you willed that you would do. And feel and mentally see it happening as you do it. Feel and mentally see that happening as you do it. In ink, on the paper, as the outer thing. The inner, feel and mentally see it happening as you do it, engraving your list into your subconscious mind and upon your will. Just like you've willed it to happen and just like you wrote that you were going to do it. Make it true. And there it is. When you're finished, it's done. Feel the result for as long as you like. Feel the result for as long as you like. And then thank the universe for having joined in and for having backed you with its power. Vow to always remember it, the universe and its power, and to always remember your complete dependence on it, and vow to always remember this moment, and that this moment is for everybody. And then right now, command your subconscious mind to keep you reminded of these vows. Command your subconscious mind to keep you reminded of those vows. This is many little steps to take. Each one of these sentences is something to do. Do each one. It's so important to have gone through all of this several times before getting into action. Viewing it, knowing what's coming up. Then maintain your same level of focus or attention, but shift its direction away by placing it on the breathing and relaxing again. And do that. And now, trust that the goal refinement and engraving work is finished. You have given it its due attention. The goal refinement and engraving work is done. Trust that the reasons why you did it the way you did it are now transformed into the results that you intended, and that they are set into place. You have made the mold and you have poured in the substance. It is real in the mental and the astral planes. They are the mold for the mundane plane. The deed is done. It is a done deal. It is sealed into place. Trust that you have given the goal refinement and engraving matters their due attention. It is over. It requires no further attention. You did what you needed to do at this point, and any further attention to it would be undue and would just waste energy. It's done. Therefore, any further thought about the act ought only be in the form of remembering having performed it. There is one thing left to do, and it immediately follows here, and you might as well do it now. First use, activation. The first time that you engage conscious interaction with your engraved goals brings their power to work in your conscious life. It, so to speak, activates them in your awareness simply because you are consciously doing something with them. It also informs your subconscious mind that you know that they are in motion in there and that you intended to play a conscious role in that motion. As an act of your will, slowly and deliberately read your entire list of motivating goals document, starting with the title. Use your mental sense of hearing to hear each word loudly in your mind as you read it. Place your full attention on each word, considering what each word means to the point of feeling it. Make sure that you do it 3 times in a row. The whole thing, all the way through each time. When you perform any repetitive sequence like this, make each time through cumulatively more deliberate, more attentive, and endowed with meaning and feeling than the time before. By cumulatively, I mean similarly to the result of pressing an accelerator pedal incrementally toward the floor, or blowing up a balloon in sequences of breaths. Each time you press or blow further, your miles per hour starting point is the result of the previous time you pressed it, or the inflation of the balloon is an increase from the time before. Enter this action with the understanding that as you do it, your motive-directed willpower sees its own motives up close and down deep at the same time, in front of your eyes and down in your will. Enter this action with the understanding that as you do it, your motive-directed willpower sees its own motives up close and down deep at the same time, in front of your eyes and down in your will. It is a multifaceted redundancy loop, like a glorified mirror reflection of a mirror. You can almost feel it happening. This understanding presupposes that you trust all that you did previously when you refined and sealed the goal. You did it. Now you use it. Do it now. And remember, attention. With all that done, remember, I ended with, now you use it. The statement. Use it how? Well, in addition to your subconscious mind doing its long-term work to bring about the best results in your life through circumstances and through your now deeply supported conscious effort, one immediate function of your motivating goals is to maintain and even to increase your interest in the rest of your goal-oriented work. We're following a basic formula, remember? On one level, that is, motives create interest. At the same time, you deepen and strengthen your engraved goals. And with respect to them, the direct line you have created between the outer and the inner, you are deepening and strengthening as well. Additionally, you gain ground with a new way of thinking about you, your will, attention, thoughts, action, your mental sense of hearing, and interaction with things you've planted into your subconscious mind in your minute-to-minute experience. This all is, in fact, within your control, and the proof is at hand. Your actual skill in reading your list will evolve. There will be evolving instruction here in later videos to do it every day, but don't wait until later, do it every day. The same, you will gain new useful skills as you do. Do the same thing that you did to activate in what I call activation, first use. That reading through in the manner I said 3 times. Do that every day. Every day. You will learn to control the volume in your head. Later on, I will give some guidance toward that. You can practice it yourself, but at first I want you to do it loudly in your head. Loudly. You will also learn new ways to absorb written information. I will give different ways to go about this. You will learn to develop your mental sense of vision, because we will talk about that and apply it directly to your list of motivating goals, and then take it further from there. This is your starting point, like I said. And we're going to keep it being your starting point, one way or another. Every day. You will come to feel them. You will learn to see your goals written mentally. You will come to feel them at work in many levels of your experience. They will become so much a part of your conscious life that you cannot imagine them falling anything short of eventual complete actualization, just due to this one evolving technique itself. And this is not, by far, not the only one. This is just their logical starting point that we never really let go of. We keep it and deepen it and strengthen it. Note that when you're working like this with the mechanics of your interface with reality, progress has penetrating, spreading, and multifaceted effects. You might notice them soon. And when you do, please understand that you created them by acts of your will. You are the responsible party involved. I didn't cause them. The training didn't cause them. You did. It was your earnestness, remember? And it was your action. You are taking charge. And whatever you create is yours. And so far, you created an on-paper expression of motivating goals that are also engraved in your will and your subconscious mind. Let me tell you, many creative artists have strived for years to express something that lies deep within them on canvas. You went much further in a shorter time, for in the least, what you created self-perpetuates. Remember, motives create interest. Motives create interest. And remember, too, that you must do all that you can to actualize your motivating goals relentlessly but easily at every opportunity. That includes, but is not limited to, all the rest that this project includes here, that we will go through together and have been going through. And by is not limited to, I mean, for example, to look for and employ all relevant opportunities. To decide or will to do something and then not follow through at the right time or times weakens your will, you know, and acts to repel the desired result from your life experience. Doing the opposite has the opposite effect. Following through at the right times strengthens your will and acts to attract the desired result. And given the scope of the material in this project, almost everything about your life will be opportune. And the time will almost always be right. And this actually helps with the ease of it. Now here's the follow-up that I've already indicated. For the week to follow, and continuing on after that, just from now on, every day, until some variation of this is given here in my channel, just continue doing the relevant things that you already have been doing toward your personal involvement, but now do them starting with performing the instruction given a moment ago called activation. So if you have a morning routine, you create a mood of calm confidence, okay, or at the end of the day, you use the emotional closure technique, whatever you do, start it with performing the instruction given a moment ago called activation with your list of motivating goals. Always deepening, always strengthening. As you can imagine, this serves multiple purposes, and importantly, be aware that every time you do it, you strengthen the connection between all of your work and the desired goal. Think about that, the connection. When you connect activity to a goal, the involved motion involves orienting the activity. And when you constantly strengthen the connection, the motion or vibration is toward that goal. You are bringing about the goal. Recall the laws of work in that and get used to the idea that you're employing them with full knowledge. And that the result is inevitable because it is the law and you are performing your duty to the law in obeying its aspects. The corresponding actual experience must follow. It is the universe doing its thing through you. Trust that, and it will make the state of affairs all the more the case. At the very least, you now know exactly where you're headed. You can see it on paper. At the very least, it's yours and it is good. You have spelled out some of your motives in there. Now everything that follows can make some greater sense. This is just in the least. Everything that follows makes some greater sense, at least with respect to where it's all heading. Everything to follow will lead there. That's logical, intuitive, and practical. And doing this involved understanding and action. Like we said, it needed to be done. Any blockage or uncertainty that popped up during arriving at said understanding or performing said action, from your initial scribble to the hermetic seal, was clogging the way of you truly knowing where you were headed in the first place. But now you've got it. It's a hefty accomplishment. You're in the driver's seat more now than ever before. Feel that now. Repeated attention to the paper list, done in certain ways, cuts the engraving deeper and deeper, waters it, gives it even more life, as well as maintains your motivation to do the other things that are parts of the overall plot. The paper list and the engraving are intimately connected, as are the areas of the planes in which they exist. There is now a direct and continuous line from the outer to the inner. You will both strengthen and deepen that line. Your line runs from paper to subconscious mind. It also runs from material plane through the astral by way of your emotive feeling, through the lower mental by way of your cognition, and into the higher mental plane, at least because of the intense refinement. And always remember the line, and that it ultimately originated and keeps on originating in the universal. Always remember that line from inner to outer, from paper to subconscious mind, from material plane to higher mental plane, ultimately originated in and keeps on originating in the universal. Always remember that it has purpose involving humanity and all life. Always, 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 again, instruct your subconscious mind to keep you reminded of those two facts to help you live up to your earlier vow to remember. Your persistent deepening and strengthening and remembering increasingly will help fundamentally to actualize your life endeavor result, whatever it is. Personal involvement, achievement. In fact, you now have many ways to do that, all rolled into just a couple of things to do. Use them. Be well.